Hey everyone, my name is Sophie from Sophisticated Motherhood, and we are so close to baby number 2 arriving, and I wanted to share some of the ways that we have personally decided to prepare our toddler for bringing a newborn baby home. I did a fair amount of research on this, and so far things have been going pretty well. I will make sure to update how the sibling bond is going and how our toddler in fact does when he meets his new baby brother and all of that stuff, but I did want to share some tips on what you can do to prepare your toddler, potentially from the moment you find out you're pregnant until you give birth. In terms of when you decide to tell the soon-to-be older sibling that you are pregnant, that's first of all, completely up to you, but also really age dependent. Our kids are going to be exactly 2 years apart. So when I found out that I was pregnant, our son was about 14 or so months old, and that's pretty young to comprehend what's going on. I have a history of miscarriage, so telling people in general, I typically wait a little bit longer. And if you have an older child that is able to understand what's going on a little bit more, it's something you might want to consider if you're going to tell them very early on. You might want to think through what if something were to happen, and maybe you want to wait through the first trimester. Of course, and I don't want to be negative here, things can always happen in a pregnancy beyond the first trimester. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind as you are telling your children, but it can always be that you may have to have some pretty difficult conversations. You might also have to have difficult conversations about where babies come from if you have kids that are old enough to start asking that question. Again, because our son was 14 months old, I told him the second I found out I was pregnant. I put a little shirt on him the day that I took a positive pregnancy test and shared with my husband, and he wore a shirt that said Big Brother. He didn't really understand, so if something did happen and I did end up having a miscarriage, he probably wouldn't have known the difference if I just stopped talking about it. Another thing you might want to consider, and it's possible you were thinking this when I said that you might want to wait till you're past the first trimester, is if you're somebody that deals with really bad morning sickness, maybe you are suddenly finding yourself really tired, food aversions, other pregnancy issues that can come up in the first trimester, it might be kind of a necessity to tell your toddler or child a little bit earlier because of what's going on. Mommy's really sick right now. Mommy's tired because she has a baby in her tummy. Mommy needs to sit down. Mommy needs to sleep. Whatever it is that may impact the timeline in which you decide to tell your older children. And when I say that the age of your kids matters, especially when they're younger, even the number of months really can make a difference. The level of comprehension my toddler had when I first told him I was pregnant versus now is drastically different, most of which is probably just because he's so much older now. But the other part of it is probably because we have been doing a lot of things to talk about babies and prepare him for being a big brother. And so some of those things I've started to do to help him understand the concept is, like I said, talking about babies a lot. We went to the pediatrician because he had an appointment and we heard some babies crying. I told him to listen, and that was a baby that was crying. When we see babies in public, we say, "Ooh, look at the little baby. You're gonna have a little baby brother." You could also visit friends that maybe have babies or have 2 kids or more kids and talk about siblings to explain that concept to them, especially if you're in the situation like me where you only have one child and you are going to be bringing a second one home. So my son doesn't really have the concept of siblings yet. If you have more than one child already, then they understand that concept already of being a sibling. If you want to talk more about being a big sibling, a big brother or a big sister, we bought a book about being a big brother for him that we read, and I've been reading it all throughout my pregnancy for him, talking about what the big brother can do to help the baby and to help mommy and help daddy with the baby. You can also talk about introducing the concept of dolls. I know a lot of people have success with that, with introducing dolls to their kids and talking about feeding the baby and changing the baby and all of the things that are involved. And if you have a really young child where that age gap is pretty close and you just want them to understand the concept of like what a baby is, we also have been showing our toddler lots of pictures of him when he was a baby and explaining how he used to be in mommy's tummy. My growing belly has definitely helped a lot. Now he identifies that there is a baby inside mommy's tummy, and I think it's a lot easier when he physically can see that there is a larger tummy here. Although sometimes I wonder to myself, does he remember that I didn't always have this tummy? When we first talked about the idea that there was a baby inside mommy's tummy, and we would say, where is the baby? And we'd lift up my shirt and point to my tummy. He got kind of confused. And if we would ask him, where's the baby? He would lift up his own shirt and point to his tummy. So expect some bumps along the road as they're trying to comprehend what's going on. And if all else fails, when you bring a new baby home to your house and they don't leave, they're now a part of your family forever, your child is going to quickly adapt and understand what's going on. And one last thing before we move on to the next topic that we did do is, especially near the end, as I am nesting and getting ready for baby number 2 to arrive, is get him really involved in pulling out all of the baby gear and equipment, getting the nursery ready. He can easily identify baby toys now. Those are the toys for the baby. This is where the baby's gonna sit. This is where the baby's gonna sleep. He points to the other chair in the car because we have the car seat installed and says baby sit, because he knows that's where his baby brother is gonna sit next to him in the car. So you can also get them involved in some of the planning and prepping for baby's arrival. A few other things to keep in mind in terms of planning, this is nice to think about when you first find out that you're pregnant, is that there are a lot of transitions, especially if you have a young child or a toddler who is going through all of these developmental stages and a lot of milestones, that it can be important to try not to have those land exactly when you're having a baby, if at all possible. Think about things like potty training, stopping using a pacifier, a switch in their schedule, a major switch in their schedule, like starting daycare or starting school, moving out of the crib. We switched Owen to a completely different room. So I tried to plan all of that stuff in advance. We decided to keep the nursery as the nursery and move him to a different room. I just felt that was going to be a little bit easier for us. And a lot of people were giving us the advice that that's a really big change for your toddler. You really should keep him in the same spot. And let me tell you, we did it months ago, as early as possible. And I don't even think he knows the difference now. I don't even think he remembers that he used to sleep in that room. And it's also going to be a while before the new baby goes into that room and is in the nursery sleeping there. And I was very conscious of making sure he didn't feel like a new baby came to the house and was suddenly taking over his room. We kept him in a crib so we didn't have to worry about that transition. And I don't think he's anywhere near the point of transitioning to a big boy bed. So I think we're okay there. But another transition we personally have been dealing with is potty training. He was really showing some signs of being ready. We tried to potty train at about 22 months and he did actually quite a good job. But when we sent him back to daycare, I don't know what happened there, but it just didn't click at daycare. So I have decided to not really push it. We're so close to the arrival of our second that I don't want those transitions to be at the exact same time. So I'm just going to hold off for a bit, probably wait till he is showing a lot more interest again, and then bring that back up and we'll try potty training him again. And as I've been talking about, a main reason for that is I don't want to be doing those two things at the same time, introducing him to a new sibling, having a brand new newborn at the house, and potty training him, just because that's a lot for everyone. But also because a lot of times kids go through a little bit of a regression when a newborn comes home. And that can be for a variety of different reasons. They could be lashing out a little bit. They could be jealous. They could be seeing baby use a pacifier and they think, why can't I use a pacifier? So if you logically think about it and you take the example of weaning them off of a pacifier right before a new sibling joins and you introduce the newborn to a pacifier, they're thinking, hey, wait, why does this guy get a pacifier and I don't? So spacing those things out, I think the recommendation I saw a lot of places when I was researching is kind of plus or minus 3 months if possible. So in that 6-month gap, which I know is a very long time, trying not to have those transitions 3 months before or 3 months after the arrival of a baby if you can possibly avoid it. The thing that I've probably been most worried about with having a second is not being able to give my first the same amount of attention, and whether he has those skills to be able to sit and wait, or does he have the skills to be gentle with a baby, and how I'm gonna do maybe managing both of them at the same time. So my husband and I have really been working on teaching those new skills or strengthening those skills that will hopefully help us to transition when we have a second. As I mentioned, one of those big ones is teaching your child to wait and be patient. If you have a 2-year-old like I do, that's easier said than done, but we're starting to model those types of things and have been starting to model those types of things because I know that I'm not just going to be able to rush over to him every single second he needs something when I may be in the middle of nursing a baby, or I think about the situation of trying to put a newborn down for a nap and he needs to be entertained. So we've been working on independent play. So hopefully he'll be able to play for just a moment while I go take care of something for the baby. He loves to be carried a lot. So we've been encouraging him to walk on his own a little bit more and that he doesn't need to be carried everywhere. We have been holding his hand sometimes as he walks places as a compromise to carrying him. He's also just getting very heavy. I'm very pregnant. I can't be carrying him around right now. So it's almost a necessity right now that he figures out how to walk on his own. And then the other thing we've talked about is being gentle and soft hands. You can model that if you have a pet. Maybe you've already been modeling that for a while, or talking about it with stuffed animals. We use stuffed animals a lot, or blankets. And we talked about, being soft and gentle. And now every time we say like, okay, be gentle, soft hands, he does that and he gives a little kiss. It's so cute. So I can't wait to see if he does that with his little baby brother too. And just as some of these other topics I've talked about are age dependent, growing and teaching these skills is very age dependent too. So if you have an older child, it might be a little bit different. If you have a younger child and you have a smaller age gap, it might not be possible. And you might just have to go through a little bit more of a struggle in the early days before they're able to grasp some of those concepts, because our kids need us. And that is just part of having multiple children. You're going to be stretched in different ways. With that, the other thing that I've heard a lot of advice on that I just want to quickly mention is the concept of don't blame the baby. I think that is great advice. If you don't want there to be jealousy, animosity, or there to be issues with your child kind of lashing out, it helps if you don't say, I can't do this right now because I'm feeding the baby, or I'm with the baby right now, I can't hold you, I can't do this, I can't do that because of the baby. If there's a way that you can rephrase it a little bit, like, I'll come help you in just a minute, mommy needs a second, and it's putting it more back on you rather than the baby, I think that's a really great way to do it. And then I've also heard the reverse too can be very helpful, to tell the baby, I'm playing with your brother right now. I'll come and take care of you in just a second. I want to finish this up with your brother. And though your newborn is not going to understand what the heck you're saying, it shows your older child that there's kind of a give and take on both sides. Baby has to wait just like you have to wait. So it's a little bit more of an equal relationship, and it's not all of this attention suddenly going to the baby and they're left high and dry. The last point is when and how to introduce the new baby to the older sibling. And I've gone kind of back and forth on this. So there is the decision of whether you want them to come to the hospital or you want to bring the baby home and have them meet the baby in your home environment. I personally think what we're going to do is have our older child meet the baby at the house, because I worry that if he comes to the hospital, he would be really upset if he had to go back home and leave. He does pretty well with my in-laws, and that's who he's going to be staying with when we're in the hospital. So I think he'll do okay for a couple of days without us. And he's not going to really know the difference of meeting his baby brother like a day earlier or not. So I think it probably works better for us just to have him meet the baby at the house. I've also heard specifically that it can be helpful to not be holding the baby when your older child comes in, so you can greet them, give them a hug, and they can kind of approach the baby and don't feel threatened that all of a sudden now you have somebody else that you're holding and they've been replaced in a sense. So if you can have the baby in a bassinet, in their car seat, in some sort of like a newborn lounger next to you, anything like that, so you're able to welcome the older child with open arms and they can then kind of approach the newborn that way, is probably what we're going to do. The other thing that we're going to do is we are going to have the baby give a gift to our older child. And I've also heard it's a great idea to do it the other way around and have your older child make a gift for the baby. Maybe they want to draw them a picture. If you want to take them to the store to pick something out that they bought for the baby, that exchange can be a really helpful way to get the siblings to feel like they're including each other. So those are kind of all of the things that we've been doing to prepare our older child and to prepare ourselves for having two. If you are a parent of multiples and you have other ideas, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what you have. And then, like I said, I will update as things are going on and how that transition's going. If I have more tips for once you actually have 2 children, I will continue to share that. But I thought I would share a little bit about how I managed it through the pregnancy journey before baby boy number 2's arrival. I want to thank you for joining me as together we make this motherhood journey sophisticated.